The History of Magic was originally published in 1860 by Eliphas Levi. His pen name was Alphonse Louis Constant, and he was both a Roman Catholic priest and an occultist. Levi was one of the most important figures in the 19th century occult revival. The magician Aleister Crowley later claimed that he was the reincarnation of Levi. In 1913, the History of Magic was translated into English by A.E. Waite, a British poet and scholarly mystic who wrote extensively on occult and esoteric matters, and was the co-creator of the Rider-Waite tarot deck. The History of Magic explores the origins, important figures, and development of magical practices throughout history, beginning with ancient times to modern times. Translator A.E. Waite wrote a lengthy introduction to the History of Magic. I found it to be very interesting because it also reveals Waite's biases. Waite inserts a plethora of footnotes within the text of the book because he says that, quote, readers of his, Levi's, history must be prepared for manifold inaccuracies. Those who know anything of Egypt, the antiquities of its religion and literature, will have a bad experience with the chapter on Hermetic magic. Those who know Eastern religion on its deeper side will regard the discourse on magic in India as title deeds of all incompetence. While in respect of later Jewish theosophy, I have had occasion in certain annotations to indicate that Levi had no extensive knowledge of those Kabbalistic texts on the importance of which he dwells so much and about which he claims to speak with full understanding. He presents, however, some of their lesser aspects, end quote. However, Waite states that regardless of the manifold inaccuracies, Eliphas Levi's account of the History of Magic is an important work, and this is why he decided to translate it. He says that Levi is the authoritative exponent-in-chief of all the alleged sciences. It is he who restored and placed them under a new and more attractive vesture, and he claimed the very fullest knowledge concerning them, being both an adept and master. According to Waite, Levi's original statement of the claims, nature, and value of transcendental magic were as follows. 1. There is a potent and real magic, popular exaggerations of which are actually below the truth. 2. There is a formidable secret, which constitutes the fatal science of good and evil. 3. It confers on man powers apparently superhuman. 4. It is the traditional science of the secrets of nature, which has been transmitted to us from the Magi. 5. Initiation therein gives empire over souls to the sage, and full capacity for ruling human wills. 6. Arising apparently from this science, there is one infallible, indefectible, and truly Catholic religion, which has always existed in the world, but it is unadapted for the multitude. 7. For this reason there has come into being the exoteric religion of apologue, fable, and wonder stories, which is all that is possible for the profane. It has undergone various transformations, and it is represented at this day by Latin Christianity under the obedience of Rome. 8. Its veils are valid in their symbolism, and it may be called valid for the crowd, but the doctrine of initiates is tantamount to a negation of any literal truth therein. And 9, it is magic alone which imports true science. This true science deals with the exercise of a natural power, but one superior to the ordinary forces of nature. It is described in a grimoire of magic and consists of ceremonial evocations, whether of elementary spirits, with the help of pentacles, talismans, and other magic instructions, or spirits, or the souls of the dead in necromancy. These constitute lawful works, but beyond them lies the domain of black magic, which is a realm of delusion and nightmare. Eliphas Levi described himself to be a magus of light. So, who was Eliphas Levi? He described himself as a poor and obscure scholar who has found the lever of Archimedes, and he offers it to you for the good of humanity alone, asking nothing whatsoever in exchange. He was born in Paris in 1810, the son of a poor shoemaker. As a child, he was educated by a parish priest, and he eventually became a deacon. However, his strange views on doctrinal subjects eventually led to his expulsion from the seminary. And eventually he became a teacher of occult science and of Kabbalism as its primary source, and this is probably how he earned a living. Prior to these publications, however, Levi, under his civil name Alphonse Louis Constant, authored many writings in the 1840s associated with radical socialism. He regarded himself as a representative of a long tradition of revolutionary heretics who argued for the creation of a universal religious association. J. Strube, in his scholarly paper, The Baphomet of Eliphas Levi, Its Meaning and Historical Context, argues that in the 1850s, Constant identified occultism with true Catholicism and at times with true socialism. To quote Strube, his Baphomet was to be seen as an economic representation of this true doctrine, as the Knights Templar were considered to be the successors of the very same heretical revolutionary tradition that reached back to the Gnostics of the late ancient school of Alexandria, this one and only true tradition whose ultimate goal was the establishment of a perfect social order. Constant, or Levi as we have come to know him, was deeply involved in socialist circles, and one of his closest friends was Alphonse Esquiros, 1812 to 1876. During the Revolutionary year of 1848, the two men formed a very popular club. Esquiros wrote a book on the heretical historiography of socialism, and in it he stated that, quote, the superior science that was at the root of political radicalism originated with Jesus Christ, who was the first revolutionary, and was handed down in the form of occultic works such as astrology, alchemy, and magic, which concealed the opposition of the human spirit during the centuries of darkness, especially the religious opposition, followed by the opposition against monarchy. End quote. Levi was also familiar with other topics that were essential to radical socialist writings during the 1830s and 1840s. These included Lucifer and the notion of the redemption of Satan. However, by 1845, Levi had turned to Catholic traditionalism and rationalism and emphasized the need for authority and hierarchy. This is probably why A.E. Waite, when writing the introduction to the history of magic, wrote, "What has happened to a writer who has thus gone back on his own most strenuous claims?" However, Strube explains this by stating that Levi did not abandon his old beliefs, but became convinced that he had come to their true meaning. There's much confusion among the general public as to the meaning of Levi's Baphomet. A.E. Waite used it in his famous tarot card deck as representing the devil. However, it appears that A.E. Waite was mistaken in his interpretation of Levi's image of Baphomet. Levi himself wrote in his book on Dogma and Ritual of High Magic that it is not a representation of the Christian devil. He denied the existence of the devil altogether. He wrote, quote, "Satan as a superior personality and as a force does not exist. Satan is the personification of all errors, all perversities, and consequently also of all weaknesses. The devil, in black magic, is the great magical agent employed for evil by a perverted will." End quote. He also denied that there was any connection between Lucifer and Satan. Instead, Lucifer and Satan symbolized two opposing tendencies in human nature that were not separate tendencies, but either positive or negative forces of what he called the astral light. Lucifer, the force of liberty and progress, and Satan, perversion and anarchy. Therefore, we can see that Levi's Baphomet is best understood within the context of the socialist doctrines he was studying in the 1840s. Those doctrines had as their aim the creation of a perfect social order. Levi's teachings about occultic science were supposed to lead to a final synthesis of science, religion, and philosophy. The Baphomet served as a symbol of the astral light, the medium of all magic, and the goal of the magus was to gain power over it. By the time of his death around 1875, a large collection of manuscripts, many unpublished, were left behind. Besides the history of magic, two of the most significant included The Doctrine of Transcendental Magic, published in 1855, and Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, published in 1856. Levi incorporated the tarot cards into his magical system, and as a result, the tarot has been an important part of the paraphernalia of Western magicians. The magicians of the Golden Dawn were strongly influenced by his writings. Levi explains that he followed the rational order of sacred numbers when dividing the subject material of his book. The history of magic is arranged in 7 books, each with 7 chapters. The first book is dedicated to the sources of magic and designated with the key letter Aleph. Book 2 contains historical background and its key letter is Beth. The third book discusses the realizations of antique science in Christian society and its letter is Gimel. Book 4 is about the civilizing power of magic among various groups, and its letter is Dalet. Book 5 is about adepts and the priesthood, and is represented by the letter He, represented in the magical alphabet by the symbol of a high priest. Book 6 exhibits the intervention of magic in the work of the Revolution, and its corresponding letter is Vau, symbol of the creative lingam and the reaper's sickle. The last book, Book 7, contains an exposition of modern workings and discoveries, new theories on light and magnetism, and is the summary of the science itself. Levi refers to Book 7 as the crown of the work, as the septenary is the crown of numbers, uniting the triangle of idea to the square of form, and its corresponding letter is Zain. In the introduction to his book, Levi defines magic as the science of the ancient magi. He says that it combines in a single science that which is most certain in philosophy, which is eternal and infallible in religion. He notes that the doctrines and mysteries of magic have been degraded over the ages due to misuse by practitioners who unwisely made secret things known and allowed the teachings to fall into the hands of the unworthy. He describes himself as a Catholic Christian. Levi describes the force responsible for what he calls practical magic. He says, quote, "There is a composite agent, a natural and divine agent, at once corporeal and spiritual, and universal plastic mediator, a common receptacle for vibrations of movement and images of form, a fluid and a force which may be called, in a sense at least, the imagination of nature. By the mediation of this force, every nervous apparatus is in secret communication together. Hence comes sympathy and antipathy, hence dreams, hence the phenomena of second sight and extranatural vision. The universal agent of nature's works is the astral light of the Martinus." According to Levi, this astral light warms, illuminates, magnetizes, attracts, repels, vilifies, destroys, coagulates, separates, breaks, and conjoins everything under the impetus of powerful wills. God created it on the first day when he said, "Let there be light." This force itself is blind, but it is directed by egregores, that is, by chiefs of souls, or in other words, by energetic and active spirits. And egregores is spelled E-G-R-E-G-O-R-E-S. When this astral light is congested or overwhelms the brain, sight is turned inward instead of outward, and this is the cause of apparitions, extraordinary visions, and intuitive phenomena that are linked to madness or ecstasy. This force is to be used in an appropriate fashion by initiates only, because in the wrong hands it can become black magic. Levi dreamed of a great religious harmony which does not exist outside what he says is the lawful hierarchy of the Catholic Church. He traces the primal tradition of this one and only revelation to the Kabbalistic doctrine preserved by the priesthood of Israel. This, he says, is contained in the Sefer Yetzirah, or the Book of Creation, the Zohar, the Book of Splendor, and the Talmud. Levi notes that scriptures say that Solomon erected 2 columns before the door of his temple, called Joachim and Boaz, meaning the strong and the weak. This symbolizes the idea that every force postulates a resistance on which it can work. Every light a shadow, every convex a concave, every influx a receptacle, every reign a kingdom, every sovereign a people. And these are only some examples. Light without shadow, for example, would be invisible for human eyes because it would produce an overpowering brilliance equal to the greatest darkness. Light is the active principle and darkness is the passive principle. Levi states that Kabbalistic symbolism represents God by a duplicated image, one upright, the other reversed, one white, and the other black. At the end of his long introduction, Levi discusses what he calls the war which the church has been forced to make against magic. He says it became necessary for the church to take this action because of false Gnostics who propagated a profane version of magic. He proclaims that the true science of the Magi is Catholic essentially because the Catholic Church has within it a serious and absolute hierarchy. In Levi's words, quote, magic had its anarchists, its makers and adherents of sects, its thaumaturgists and sorcerers. The role of the serious magician, however, and his purpose in writing the book, is to present a serious account of the science of magic, especially since many do not believe that it is a science. Levi says that most people are attracted to magic because they see it as a way to satisfy their passions, and they think that magic will provide a path to realizing that goal. In his eyes, this profanes the true science of occultism. In the next video, I will try to break down the content of the history of magic by summarizing the most significant and interesting portions of each of the 7 books. It is a lengthy book. It took me a long time to read through the whole thing. So I'm not going to be able to go too far in depth, but hopefully you will at least get a flavor for what Eliphas Levi was trying to do with the history of magic. He was trying to summarize and preserve important information. Thanks for watching. See you next time.